Orange Shirt Day is very important to Native culture, especially like California Native culture, considering the impacts of the boarding school era and the missions.
The trauma and the legacy that's been passed down in Native communities and in Native families.
A day of remembrance and honoring of both survivors of residential boarding schools in the United States and Canada.
It gives me a chance to show empathy and heart to the families that were affected by the boarding school era.
Growing up, I saw those impacts a lot within my own household. I was raised by my great grandpa who attended the Sherman Indian Boarding School in Riverside County. So he was a very traumatized individual, and that kind of showcased in a lot of his day-to-day like activities and stuff, and just like hanging out with him. So I think as I got older, I kind of understood that more, and the development of Orange Shirt Day was really important because at a young age, like that wasn't something that was celebrated, and now we're able to embrace it and kind of mourn as a community, mourn kind of the victims with the victims that are still alive.
I have family who were in boarding school. My great grandma went to the Sherman Indian School when she was 5 years old. And my great great aunt also went to Sherman. It's just a way for me, think about what they went through, to think about how what happened to them there has been passed down intergenerationally in my family.
To me personally, it is about honoring the collective continuance of Indigenous nations within the face of incredibly difficult periods of colonization that are ongoing. It's also something that has afterlives in terms of the rates of separation of Indigenous children from their families.
Heppner Hall is very strategically representing a mission, and considering the history of the missions, it's kind of a traumatizing sight to see.
I think it's really impactful and powerful to have this installation in front of Heppner Hall because of the Spanish mission iconography that it represents. That is a tool of colonization against Indigenous peoples, and especially here in California and in San Diego.
If we think about the mission as a primary site of Native dispossession and also the rupture of Native families, I think it's incredibly powerful to connect that to this space when we're thinking about Native children who have been murdered and also kidnapped, essentially.
Art, regardless of the importance and stuff, you could feel it, and that's definitely kind of how Heppner stands. Like, you look at it and it kind of just feels eerie, especially as a Native student. It's just, I don't know, it doesn't feel good like to see a mission implemented on your campus. I think it being there, it needs to be there, and how they showcase the feet is very important as well, to kind of show just the movement inside the mission.
Logically, there's a lot of foot traffic there, so it gets a lot of exposure for the art installation to be in that location. But secondly, it's also symbolic. A lot of people go through Heppner Hall, enter through it. Our footsteps are faced towards Heppner Hall. It's almost like the institution that is like SDSU is almost like the boarding school institutions.
Growing up in California, one of the assignments we had to do in like fourth grade, I think it was the mission project. And you literally had to build a mission, and we would visit all the missions. And as a Native student in a very Native impacted, I guess, city, it was very like uncomfortable to go through and have to build this place that traumatized my grandpa, my aunts, my uncles, my ancestors, and just to kind of have that like in my house, get graded on that, it was just like uncomfortable because we don't make any other kind of minority group, I guess, demonstrate a place of trauma at a young age.
The message that I want to convey most concretely is that this is a day of remembrance that calls us to action.
There's a lot of messages that can be said about Orange Shirt Day. The biggest one for me is probably there's a lot of harm done by like the U.S. That people like to ignore. So Orange Shirt Days gives us a chance to recognize that we aren't as squeaky clean as we always like to believe. But if we recognize that, it gives us a chance to overcome and correct those mistakes.
I hope to let people know the truth, just to focus the education towards it, because there's no education. Like, this story has been so buried, just like the bodies that have been buried and unable to be identified. We just want our stories to be identified. The children that were lost and traumatized to just kind of be able to like move on from this trauma and move on in the next life that they're in. And we want to help them do that.